As we go into an election, we have to ask ourselves, will we be around in 2029 for the next election? Welcome to my channel, y'all. I hope you're having a great day. Well, you probably have noticed that I haven't posted anything in the last week, and that's because I've been quite ill. So I do have a lot to talk about. So let's get into it by starting off with talking about the election that's coming up, or at least the planned announcement of the election tomorrow by Marx Carnage. Now, if you think I'm being harsh on Marx Carney by calling him that, well, let's first go to this clip that I've taken from X, and then we'll talk about it. In his book, Values, Building a Better World for All, Mark Carney, former governor both of the Bank of Canada and the Bank of England, claims that Western society is morally rotten and that it has become corrupted by capitalism, which has brought about a climate emergency that threatens life on Earth. This, he claims, requires rigid controls on personal freedom, industry, and corporate funding. And if that doesn't worry you enough, he also wrote in his book about Marx and Ingles, his support of their philosophies. And in his book, he wrote that basically he wanted society to become more fascist. Now, he didn't use those words, but in describing how he thought that government should partner with businesses to control everything, well, that is fascism. It's a form of socialism, a far left extremist philosophy. So we have a far left extremist who's been installed as a prime minister, and hopefully we'll have an election called tomorrow so we can get rid of him. But that's assuming that Canadians are awake enough to the idea that he is a danger to our society, an existential danger to Canada. But I'm not so sure Canadians are aware of that. If you look at the recent polls, it doesn't seem to suggest that Canadians are aware of it. It seems to suggest that they are oblivious to the dangers that this individual poses to Canada. The likelihood of winning the popular vote has switched to the Liberals, according to Canada, or 338 Canada federal projection. 39% plus or minus 4, to the Conservatives 37% plus or minus 4. With a seat projection of 178 for the Liberals and 131 for the Conservatives. As you can see, that's a real problem with only 2% difference. And even when the Conservatives were polling ahead of the Liberals as far as popular vote, they were behind the Liberals as far as seat projection. That's one of my main problems that I have with our system of government. And I've done a video on this before. Maybe I'll do one again in the next little while about how the seats are distributed across Canada and why it is in favor of the Liberals and how corrupt that actually is. So when we go down to the projections by province, you don't see too much of a difference in the north. The Yukon and the Northwest Territories were always Liberal light, and Nunavut was always NDP. I assume that the yellow means NDP. I don't know why they didn't color it orange, but that's that. BC is losing ground. It's now 22 seats to 19 Liberal. I don't understand that at all. It's British Columbia is Conservative light now. Back when I was growing up, it was during the first Trudeau. It was basically a Conservative stronghold. From what I recall, I wasn't voting when that idiot was in power. Alberta remains conservative, strong conservative, but now they have 5 possible Liberal seats and 1 possible NDP seat. So that's not good. Alberta's losing as well. Saskatchewan remains 13-1, which is just remains unchanged. But here we have Manitoba has switched from Conservative light to Liberal light, which is horrible. It's a horrible thing. I think partly is because they no longer have any NDP projections to win, and that seat went to the Liberals. So That is horrible. When we go on to Ontario, Liberal light as well, and 78 to 40. I'm not sure why they're showing Liberal light if it's 78 to 40. That to me is pretty strong in the Liberal category. But it just shows how quickly these polls have changed. Are they real? Are they not real? Hard to say. Quebec now is Liberal light, 39 to 25 Liberal to Bloc. The Conservatives never really had a chance of taking Quebec, but the fact that they only have 13 seats is quite concerning. So, there you have it there. And then, of course, just like last week, we have the Liberals dominating Atlantic Canada. However, New Brunswick went from Liberal light to Liberal strong. Nova Scotia is Liberal strong, PEI Liberal strong, and of course, Newfoundland Liberal strong. So PEI and Newfoundland, all the seats are projected to go to the Liberals. Amazing. It's just amazing to me that people are so tuned out as to what's happening in Canada that they can even consider voting for the Liberals again. So maybe this will be updated tomorrow. You never know, because it's usually updated on a Sunday, but possibly not. I don't know. The odds of winning the most seats, the Liberals now have 89%. Well, the Conservatives are down to 10%. So, yeah, that is very, very concerning, considering everything that's been going on and how this was just a few months ago. If you're a Canadian and you want Canada to stick together, this is really bad news, because if these polls are accurate, it means that we are heading for a national unity crisis. And Danielle Smith has addressed that. She's addressed it, I think, 3 or 4 times now. And the latest came just a couple of days ago.
One day after Premier Danielle Smith threatened the Prime Minister with a national unity crisis over oil and gas restrictions, the two leaders have met again. This time, it was a meeting with all of Canada's premiers. One political watcher worries Smith's rhetoric is reckless in the lead up to an election. Jeremy Thompson reports.
Before I begin, I do just want to comment on an event that happened yesterday.
Premier Danielle Smith believes the feds need to get their messaging straight on Alberta's biggest industry. She says Prime Minister Mark Carney told her in a one-on-one meeting Thursday he doesn't support an oil and gas emissions cap. At a press conference that afternoon, he told reporters he does support a mechanism to cut emissions.
C'est une question de résultat.
Speaking in French, Carney said it's results that matter to Canadians, not laws.
The Prime Minister's words sounded kind of nice yesterday, until I looked at my phone right after the meeting with him and found out that his new Environment Minister had just told media on the other side of the country that the federal Liberals would be keeping the emissions cap in place.
The apparent contradiction adds weight to the Premier's threat of an unprecedented national unity crisis if the next federal government doesn't address her demands. All 9 would benefit the oil and gas industry in various ways.
Who is ginning up the national unity crisis? Is it Mark Carney, who has been Prime Minister for, I don't know, a week? Or is it Danielle Smith by raising that?
Political scientist Dwayne Bratt says Carney has capitulated to a couple of Alberta's longtime gripes, scrapping the consumer carbon tax and replacing Stephen Guilbeault as Environment Minister. He wonders exactly what Smith means when she talks about national unity.
Does that mean there'll be a referendum on separation? Is that what she's promising?
This guy gives me the impression that if you shook his hand, it'd be all kind of squishy and no calluses at all. I don't know. He seems a little bit clued out, being a political scientist. What doesn't he understand? Why is this confusing to him? A national unity crisis means a national unity crisis. And Danielle Smith is going to go on and explain just what that process will be in just a few moments here. But this guy, if he's a political science major, instructor, professor, whatever he is, he doesn't seem too competent to me if he's asking these types of questions.
We'll do a broad, fair deal panel review. We'll go and talk to Albertans and see what they would like us to do in response.
The Premier had another chance today to put her concerns to Carney, attending a First Minister's meeting in Ottawa by video call. Jeremy Thompson, CTV News, Edmonton.
Now, that meeting between the premiers and the prime minister just wrapped up. So the focus was trade talks and safeguarding Canada's economy. The PM says there will be free trade across all provinces by Canada Day. Now, when asked about building pipelines, he spoke about developing a framework so private business could build things like pipelines and energy grids. Now, Ontario Premier Doug Ford spoke shortly after the meeting, saying all of the rules have changed. Canada has to build infrastructure quickly that helps get our products to other customers.
So what can we glean from this? Well, we know now that how two-faced Mark Carney is, how he'll say one thing to Danielle Smith and have his ministers say completely opposite things across the country. He can't be trusted. And he does this on his own as well. He says that he doesn't have any conflicts of interest, and yet we know that he does, and he actually has come out and admitted that he actually does have conflicts of interest. He said that he wasn't involved in the decision to move his company headquarters from Canada to New York City, but we know that he did. He said that he wasn't even involved in the company at that time, but we know that that decision was made well before he decided to resign and well before he put his hat in the ring to be the Prime Minister of Canada. So this guy is a liar. We can't trust him. But it's not just Canadians who can't trust him. Let's go and see what Liz Truss, the former Prime Minister of the UK, who was his boss at one time, let's see what she has to say about Mark Carney.
I think it is extraordinary that Mark Carney has become the Prime Minister of Canada. He did a terrible job in Britain of the governorship of the Bank of England. He created a lot of the problems that blew up on my watch and that I got blamed for were actually created by him. He backed Labour in the election and Rachel Reeves's policies, which are leading the country to bankruptcy. So why on earth the Liberal Party of Canada has selected this man, I have no idea. And I think it is illegitimate that this guy has never been elected as a member of Parliament in Canada. I'm utterly puzzled, and the Canadians. I'm not going to tell the Canadians how to vote. Obviously, I want the Conservatives to be elected in Canada, but I think it's Justin Trudeau has pursued a lot of the same policies that Europe has been pursuing, and America has raced ahead of us. Back at the turn of the millennium, the average Brit was catching up with the average American in terms of income per head.
Wow.
We are now $34,000 a year behind. We are poorer than Mississippi, which is the poorest American state. And the same is true. The same is true of France and Germany, and to some extent of Canada, because they pursued all of these woke policies. High taxes, high spending, not using their natural resources. And Justin Trudeau was the architect of that. And of course, Mark Carney has been the advocate of these policies. So I don't know what is going on in Canada, but in the same way as I think people in Britain need to wake up to what the real threat to our country is, I think they need to wake up in Canada.
Well, you might be thinking, but he's Canadian. He wouldn't treat us that poorly. He just had a job to do over there. He wasn't emotionally invested in the UK. But then again, he actually was, because he doesn't consider himself to be a Canadian first. He considers himself to be a European. Take a look at this.
Mark, you look like you were about to.
Yeah, it was a tell.
As a European, as a
European, I am a European, actually.
Oh, you are?
Yeah,
Oh.
Irish citizen. Yeah. So there you
welcome.
go.
Welcome.
Speaking as a European, I like to say following.
He holds 2 European passports, one in the UK and one in Ireland, and he considers himself to be a European. But he's running to be the Prime Minister of Canada. He should only consider himself to be Canadian. He should have one priority, and that should be Canada. Enough of this globalist crap that we've been living with in the last 10 years, and longer than that when you consider Pierre Elliott Trudeau and the corruption under Chrétien and Martin. These globalists are bad enough, but when you're the Prime Minister of a country, you need to put your country first and foremost, and nothing else should come before Canada. But he can't do that because he's a European, And he's a member of the WEF. That form there, where he was sitting claiming to be a European, was a WEF form. This man is dangerous, and he will destroy Canada. But beyond that, he's also very arrogant. He actually thinks he shouldn't have to answer questions about his finances to the CBC or the Globe and Mail. Take a look at this interaction that happened in London over a week ago.
Mr. Carney, Stephanie Levitz with Globe and Mail. We understand that you have now placed your assets in a blind trust, so you don't know what's happening to them going forward, but you knew what they were going into that blind trust. So what are they?
Look, Stephanie, I follow the rules of the Ethics Commissioner. I'm following them well in advance of any of the requirements, as you know, because I know you know this. You know that these requirements come into effect in months. We're talking days after I became Prime Minister. So I'm complying with the rules of the Ethics Commissioner, going through the processes and all these things that are necessary.
Spoken like a true lying Liberal politician. He doesn't answer the question. He avoids the question. He pivots. But now he's actually about to deflect as well. Have a listen to this.
And I will remind you, and I'll remind Canadians again, that the Leader of the Opposition cannot find it. And look, you look at the questions this evening, you look at the nature of the discussions, you look at the nature of discussions I had with the President of France, the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. The Leader of the Opposition would not be capable of having those discussions because the Leader of Opposition refuses to get his security clearance, something that it took me a few weeks to get. And he has been the Leader of the Opposition for 3 years. So I comply with my responsibilities, I comply with the rules well in advance, and the Leader of the Opposition doesn't take his responsibilities at a time of, well, you should take these responsibilities at any time, but it's particularly remarkable given the stakes in global geopolitics at the moment.
So that was a very simple question, and he didn't answer it. Instead, he starts blaming Pierre Poilievre for not getting his security clearance. That had nothing to do with the question. It was completely off topic, but that's what the Liberals do. And it's a bunch of horse crap anyway. But I think you can tell that even the far left Canadian press are starting to lose patience with this guy because they won't let it go.
The rules say that those assets should be publicly disclosed within 120 days, which means you'll campaign in a coming federal election, most likely within the next 120 days, and are serving as Prime Minister now, with Canadians not being aware of what potential conflicts of interest you sought to avoid.
What possible conflict would you have, Stephanie? Stephanie, I'm complying with the rules. I'm complying with the rules in advance. Point final.
So he just dismissed her there. He essentially told her that he didn't think that her question was worthwhile, but she wasn't the only one. Rosemary Britan actually had a follow-up to this, and it's hard to hear her. It's not as loud as the other reporter, but it is interesting because of his reaction to Rosemary Britan, who is normally quite pro-liberal.
Are you saying you are not open to any conflict of interest?
Yes.
Someone spent most of his life in the private sector. There's no possible conflict of interest in your assets. It's very difficult to believe.
Wow. I think you can see that even the left-leaning press is starting to lose patience with him big time. Even Rosemary Britan is calling him out. And of course, he doesn't like that. Look at the expression on his face and his reaction.
Look inside yourself, Rosemary. I mean, you start from a prior of conflict and ill will. I have served in the private sector. I have stood up for Canada. I have left my roles in the private sector at a time of crisis for our country. I'm complying with all the rules. Your line of questioning is trying to invent new rules. I'm complying with the rules that Parliament has laid out and the responsibilities of the Ethics Commissioner. And I will continue to comply with those rules.
So he turns it back on Rosemary. He tries to make her out to be the bad guy. And in fact, Liberals online have been going crazy accusing her of doing something inappropriate. She didn't do anything inappropriate. She asked a very valid question, and he just refused to answer. He sidestepped every question, and he was being very rude and arrogant about it. But that wasn't the only time that he's dropped the ball during a press conference. His reaction to a Western Standard reporter just a few days ago in Edmonton tells you everything you need to know about this really horrible prime minister.
Prime Minister, thanks for taking my question, and welcome to Edmonton. And James from the Western Standard. You recently...
Sorry about the microphone.
Yeah, no problem. I'm a pretty tall guy. You have not been elected in a federal election yet, and you recently flew to Europe on government wide-body jet at the expense of at least $500,000. So the question I have for you today, and maybe I'll say this before I ask the question, these people around you all paid for that flight, and you've not been elected yet. So will you commit to refunding these taxpayers for that flight?
Well, it's an interesting question, way of framing it. Look, and I'm going to go back to, I'm going to allude to the question that was asked previously by Mr. Staples from the Journal, and the situation that we're in as a country, which is we are in an economic crisis that's brought on, sorry, I'm going to answer the question, brought on by the tariffs that have been put on Canada, actual and prospective. One of the challenges...
The economic crisis was brought on by former Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, and you were his advisor at the time.
I think you would find...
These people did not create that problem.
I certainly... hey, nobody in Canada created that problem. Nobody in Canada created that problem.
So right away, he avoids answering the question, and then he goes on to this other spiel about how we are in the middle of this dangerous economic situation, and he's trying to make it out like nobody in Canada caused this problem. Well, that's a bunch of bullcrap. We know that Justin caused this problem. He's been causing it for over 10 years. And we know that every Liberal government before him also caused the problem, was also very corrupt. And just answer the question, and maybe you'll get a little bit more respect, Mr. Carney. You can tell that the news reporters, not only are they losing patience with this idiot, they don't have any respect for him. Not the left, not the right, not the centralist reporters. Nobody has respect for him because he is just so arrogant. They have less respect for him than they have for Justin Trudeau. This is getting actually almost comical, the way they're treating him.
The U.S. government has decided to put tariffs on all of its closest allies. All of its closest allies. I wouldn't for a moment suggest that anyone in Canada is the cause of this. What our responsibility is to take action to react to a different world that we're in. And part of the way we do that is we build out new partnerships, new opportunities, including opportunities. And I'm going to give you a specific one, and then I don't know if you have one more follow-up, but I'll give you a specific example. It goes to my previous answer, something I also discussed with the Premier this morning, which is Canada has many advantages, and one of them is in critical metals and minerals. One of the issues is how are we going to develop the trade routes and the trade corridors rapidly in order to export those critical metals and minerals. And who are our clients for that? Who are our customers? Do we only have one customer to the south of us? The customer that's attacking us? That doesn't respect the trade agreements that they signed? Or should we develop new customers? New customers in Europe. What's required, if I may, what's required for those new customers is to build out trade corridors and infrastructure, including what I referenced in my previous answer and discussed with the Premier, is the potential to go north, go to new deep water ports. Churchill is an example, Gray's Point in Nunavut as another. And that creates a whole new set of opportunities for Albertans as a whole, for people across the country, for these hardworking people around me and those like them in the trades. And that's what my job is.
I'll take that as a no then.
No, you'll take that as a very comprehensive answer to your question.
So this arrogant POS thinks that he can dictate to a reporter and to the Canadians listening to this how they are going to take his answer. No, that reporter is taking it as a no. Remember what the question was way back before that word salad came about. The question was, because he's not an elected prime minister, will he reimburse the Canadian government for his trip to Europe? He never answered that. Basically, it's a no. But he doesn't want to say that, so he gives us word salad of a speech which doesn't say anything, and he's going to dictate to us how we take that. What an arrogant POS. This guy's dangerous. This guy's probably the most dangerous prime minister up to this point. And that's saying a lot because remember, we've had Pierre Elliott Trudeau, who was a member of the NDP before becoming a member of the Liberal Party. Now, it had a different name, but it was the precursor to the NDP. And by all accounts, most people believe that it was then a communist party. And I agree with it. I agree with what they believe. I think it was a communist party. I still believe it to be a communist party. You can disagree, but that is my opinion. So we had a communist prime minister already. And then we had Chrétien. He had a little bit more credibility than Pierre Elliott Trudeau, at least. But I still didn't like him because, well, he was liberal and he was corrupt and he wasn't a very good prime minister. And then we had his son, Justin Trudeau, the most corrupt prime minister in the history of Canada, and also the most dangerous. He was so far left of even his communist father. It was ridiculous. And now this guy who has been giving the communist Trudeau advice for the past 5 years at least. This guy who believes that Marx and Ingles and all those other socialists in history had it right. This guy who believes in fascism. From his own book, from his own words, you can interpret what he believes. He is a fascist. That's the fact. Just read his book. If you don't come up with that conclusion, that's fine. Okay, that's an opinion, and that can be your opinion. But my opinion is this guy is dangerous. And this is why Canada cannot survive 4 more years of the Liberals. If we get 4 more years of the Liberals, if he gets elected, Canada is over. At least as we know it today. The West will be gone. Alberta and Saskatchewan will be gone. BC will follow. I don't think that the U.S. wants any other provinces, to be honest with you. They will take the North, even though the North is fairly liberal, but that's for different reasons. But Canada cannot survive 4 more years of the Liberals. It just can't. But that's just my opinion. I'd love to know what you think. Put your comments down below. And while you're at it, please like this video, share with your friends and on social media. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to my channel and hit that bell notification so you never miss another video. Also, please join me on Thursday evenings at 6 p.m. Pacific time, both on YouTube and Rumble, for my live stream where you're invited to join in on the conversation. Finally, if you reside on Vancouver Island and you want to get your firearms license, I do teach the required courses. So if you'd like to take a course from me, there's a link in the show notes of this video to my website where you can sign up for one. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.